Welcome back. This is the Dan Corder Show. We're back, baby. South Africa is a movie. Still awake. What's it, like 11:45 now? But we've had an incredible lineup of interviews tonight, and this last one I care about very deeply. If you don't know, the University of Fort Hare is one of the most important universities in South Africa's history and modernity, but it's been in crisis for a long time. But the problem is, because it's not as high reputation as the big city universities, and because it's not in a big famous city, it's not getting the attention. Can you imagine if at the University of Cape Town or Wits, a bodyguard of one of the university officials was assassinated, or a building was burnt down, or people were going missing, or contracts were being dodgy, or politicians were getting involved in dodgy tenders, or the police were acting strangely? If any of that happened at UCT or Wits, not just South Africa, the world would know about that story. But all of that is happening at the University of Fort Hare. And so tonight, we're going to fix the fact that people don't know about something that they should know about. And for that, I'm delighted to welcome Prof. Siseko Kumalo, Professor Siseko Kumalo, to the show. Big round of applause, everybody. Let's get into this story. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Welcome to the show. Was my intro depressing and grave enough? Or should it have been even more depressing and grave?
I want to keep sort of like a perspective, positivity about the institution, because I do think that under the leadership of the current Vice-Chancellor, Professor Sakela Buhlungu, Fort Hare has attempted to stabilize. There have, of course, been incredible attempts, I think, to set him back on his project. And if you notice, I think the whole entire conversation around the most recent challenges at that particular institution came up because there were certain quarters that wanted him out.
Right. So let's talk about what seems to be happening. According to reports, the University of Fort Hare has been taken over by at least tenderpreneurs, potentially corrupt criminal mafias fleecing the institution of its funding, people being put in different positions. And Professor Sakela Buhlungu came from UCT as the new Vice-Chancellor and tried to clean up the institution. And since then, we've seen insane things. Bodyguards being killed, protests that don't look like student protests, firebombing of buildings that don't look like students. Like, I don't know what university you go to, but I was never taught how to firebomb at my university. Like, what is happening there that alarms you the most?
Well, I think it should be stated that when Prof. Buhlungu arrived, there was massive resistance to his first term as Vice-Chancellor, precisely because he closed the taps, all right? So he cleaned up quite systematically, put in place incredible systems. I was at the University of Fort Hare before I joined the University of Johannesburg. I worked there for 4 years. So he attempted quite systematically to turn the institution around, relocated the administrative hub of the university to eDikeni in Alice, the very institution that was under attack over the last few weeks. And even when he started out, there were calls to remove him. Immediately. And there were, for example, illegitimate Senate meetings that were held to try and vote him out, where the minister had to intervene to indicate that actually I have only the power to appoint or remove a sitting Vice-Chancellor within an institution. So those kind of dynamics are what have bedeviled Fort Hare. However, I must admit and applaud Prof. Buhlungu's leadership that has systematically and continuously sort of, I suppose, moved beyond those smallanyana little skeletons, if we can call them that, within the institution. And he's done well. He's done well. So what we're seeing now, again, is an attempt to try and derail the project that he has sort of attempted to put on at the University of Fort Hare. And as you rightfully indicated, Dan, I think at the beginning of the interview, Fort Hare has had these challenges not as a result of Sakela's leadership, right? It has been an institution since the 1990s that has been troubled. So Professor Bengu was the one who was leading the institution. After his leadership, we saw radical shifts within the institution. Professor Derek Swartz, for example, who then later became Vice-Chancellor of Nelson Mandela University, sort of came in, cleaned up after that. So it's consistently been bedeviled by a number of challenges.
So you obviously were working at UFH. You were living, where were you living? Which campus?
East London.
In East London, okay. So why, in the face of seemingly clear criminal conspiracy, has the government, the Minister of Higher Education, the Department of Higher Education, and the police not effectively protected this university?
On the one hand, the Vice-Chancellor is the guy who sort of is running the thing, right? And in the first term, I believe he enjoyed quite a lot of support from the political higher-ups, be it the minister, etc., etc.
Or like the ANC in the
Yes,
Eastern Cape? Okay.
Precisely. But what then begins to become more of a problem is when he says, well, I want to clean up and how we award qualifications as an institution, which begins to go into various offices. The offices in Bisho, for example, i.e. the Premier's office, who was this very morning in the news once again for having had squashed the SIU's investigations into his qualification from the University of Fort Hare. So you see all of these threads.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I get in trouble for this on TV tonight. This is my camera. The Premier of the Eastern Cape. His qualifications. Yeah. Let's see if that gets on TV. Okay, so there's quite a lot of support for him.
Initially.
The Vice-Chancellor.
Yes.
And then he starts to go, well, it seems as though UFH has been corruptly handing out degrees or qualifications to people who never got them so they can get these qualifications. And then politically connected people start to go, oh, not my qualification though. And then they start to panic.
So it's the politically connected individuals, it's the individuals who were drawing money out of the institution like it's a cash cow, who also are now experiencing major challenges because the Vice-Chancellor has closed the taps. So there are a number of those things, but what I must admit is incredibly important for us to think about. As you rightfully indicated, what would happen or how would we respond if this were to happen to a WITS or to a UCT, or for that matter, my own institution, the University of Johannesburg. There is silence at the moment in the sector about what's going on in the institution.
Why?
I think one of the reasons is that the board that governs the sector, i.e. the University South Africa board, which has all 26 public university vice-chancellors sitting on it, is not necessarily being steered in a direction that would garner the support that Fort Hare would need.
Okay.
And I'm not pointing fingers at any particular vice-chancellor,
I can hear that.
whether it is the chair of the board or whether it is the CEO.
Hypothetically.
But, you know, I think if we were to take a moment, for example, and look back to, say, Ahmed Bauer, Professor Bauer, who was the former CEO of USAF, he often held a very interesting view that USAF should play its role, that's University of South Africa, should play its role of being a unified body of the sector and the kind of voice with which it speaks. And I don't think that at the moment we've had that kind of deliberation, both at the level of the board or at the level of the management of USAF. I'm not blaming anyone, by the way. But I'm just saying that I think that those are the kind of challenges that we're looking at. And there should be more concerted effort
For sure.
to try and speak. Because if we say we're happy with what's happening at Fort Hare, we could have the very same elements coming onto various campuses, University of KwaZulu-Natal, the University of Johannesburg, Wits University, and what do we do then? Because if one institution falls, it's only a matter of moments before we see a domino effect in the entire sector.
What is the situation on the ground at UFH right now?
The academic project is attempting to be concluded. I've got colleagues and dear friends.
For the year, right?
Yeah.
Exams.
Exactly. I've got dear colleagues and friends at Fort Hare who indicate that they're trying to save the academic year. The Vice-Chancellor is on the charge to rebuild the institution. And I think what's also important and incredibly useful is to build back public trust. Because the community of eDikeni itself is in major support, for example. So what often doesn't come out in the media is the fact that eDikeni continues to benefit from the public infrastructure projects and programs that Sakela has put into the University of Fort Hare.
Very similar to Makanda Love
Precisely.
Roads. Yes, Rhodes University.
You know what I mean? So there are things that the community are actually in support of. I think we need to be publicizing that more, which is to say that the community do see value in the institution. precisely because of the kind of economy that is created around the University of Fort Hare.
That definitely wouldn't exist if the university wasn't
Precisely,
there.
precisely.
Yeah.
And I think my main concern, specifically as a higher education expert, would be to say, how do we ensure that students see the year through and that they
Right.
don't have a lost year as a result, for example, of lost or damaged records,
Yeah.
or as a result of the instability that we've seen at the institution. And academics are doing their level best, I must admit, at the University of Fort Hare to ensure that that happens.
Thank you so
Excellent.
much
Thank
for your
you.
time. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm very grateful for getting this story out. Professor Siseko Kumalo, everybody. Thank you so much.